Hello students, welcome back. This is Mrs. Mercado speaking. In this particular lecture, I'm going to be going over chapter 16, which deals with job order costing. This is Accounting 2402, Principles of Managerial Accounting, and the textbook that we are using is Financial and Managerial Accounting, 15th edition. Now before I move on, now you should start being more familiar as to how my course is structured. I will have a video posted every chapter, for every chapter that we cover, and it goes over problem solving. Okay, I just want to reiterate the importance of reading the chapter before you work on your assignments. Okay, you're not going to understand anything I'm doing if you didn't read the chapter. I am not going to lecture over the content. I am going to lecture over the problem solving. That way you can see how to solve specific problems. Now, I will not be going over every single problem in your homework for time constraint purposes, but just know that there's a lot of resources. Cengage has video tutorials. The ebook has great examples, detailed examples on how to solve your problems. So make sure that you do refer to your ebook for guidance on any content being covered. If you identify that you are struggling with a specific problem or a specific topic or whatever it is that you're having issues with, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. That way I can clarify any questions you might have. I do want to know the name of the student, the problem that you're working on. I want to see your work. What have you done so far? So I can be able to provide guidance. Okay, I'm not simply going to give you the answer. I'm here to teach, not to just give out the answer. So I want you to develop a sense of critical thinking and understanding what you're doing, okay, and applying what you've learned to actual real life scenarios. Excuse me. Okay, so this particular chapter, chapter 16, deals with an accounting system which accumulates different types of accounting information. Now, chapter 16 deals with job order costing. There are two primary cost accounting systems. Job order costing is going to be covered in chapter 16, and then we have process cost systems, which I believe is going to be covered in chapter 17. Okay, so those are the two primary cost accounting systems. Okay, job order cost systems basically accumulate costs for each quantity of product that passes through the factory. Okay, process cost systems accumulate costs for each department and process within the factory. Okay, so in this particular textbook, they provide you with excellent examples of the flow of the cost. There's three different costs associated. We have direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. So you do need to be familiar with what goes into each of those categories to be able to understand our calculations. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the actual problem solving component. The first problem that we're going to deal with is with exercise 16.2. Okay. Excuse me. So it says 16.2 deals with cost flow relationships. So it says the following information is available for the first year of operations of Creston Incorporated, a manufacturer of fabricating equipment. And then they give you the sales information of $12,375,000, gross profit of $5.2 million, indirect labor of $410,000, indirect materials of $180,000, other factory overhead of $810,000, materials purchased of $4,125,000, total manufacturing cost for the period of $7,880,000, and materials inventory at the end of the period of $290,000. Okay, they're asking us to calculate three things in this problem. They're asking us to calculate the cost of goods sold, the direct materials cost, and the direct labor cost. Now, I really like this problem because they give you a lot of information, and you have to think critically and use the information provided to be able to calculate what they're specifying. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to be calculating is the cost of goods sold. Remember, cost of goods sold is how much did you spend to manufacture your product, whatever it is that you're selling. Okay, now they don't give us much information about the actual cost of, putting together the product. Okay, but they do give us some other pieces of information that we can use to calculate our cost of goods sold. So I know that the cost of goods sold is basically the cost that you accumulate. Now, that cost of goods sold is utilized, that's the expense that the company or the factory incurred to produce a product. Okay. Now, what they're doing here is they're giving you the sales amount. How much did you sell these goods for? Well, according to the problem, you sold these goods for $12,375,000. Okay? And you generated a gross profit of $5.2 million. Now, with these two pieces of information right here, we can calculate how much cost of goods sold you had. Okay? So we're going to start off with our sales. How much did you sell this product for? Well, we sold it for $12,375,000. Okay? Now, I know that I had a gross profit of $5.2 million. So I'm going to deduct less my gross profit. This is how much money I had left over to cover, I sold it for $12.375 million. Then I spent X dollar amount on my cost of goods sold. That left me with a gross profit of $5,200,000. So I'm going to deduct that, $5,200,000. Now, by deducting, let me format this. Here we go. By deducting my gross profit, I am able to calculate my cost of goods sold. Okay, so your sales minus your profit gives you your cost of goods sold. Okay, so now I can do my calculation, and my cost of goods sold is $7,175,000. Okay, so this makes sense. You spent $7,175,000 on your cost of goods sold. So if you were to calculate net income, because I like to do that on the side, so my net income is my revenue minus your expenses, right? So in this case, my revenue was $12,375,000 minus my calculated expenses here of cost of goods sold of $7,175,000. Okay, now that is going to give me, calculator, $12,375,000 minus $7,175,000. Oh, I put something wrong. $12,375,000, 1, 2, 3, minus $7,175,000, 1, 2, 3. So that's going to give me my $5,200,000 net income or gross profit that I have here. Okay, so you can check your work just by doing that. Okay, revenue minus expenses. So I generated revenues of $12,375,000 from my sales of my product. Okay, I spent, according to the calculation, $7,175,000 in my cost of goods sold. So my gross profit is $5.2 million, which is what they provided to you here. Okay, so if you're missing a figure, you can calculate it by working backwards. So you know this component, you know your sales component, and you know your profit component. You deduct both of them to calculate the missing figure, which is your cost of goods sold of $7,175,000. Okay. Now, letter B. They're asking you for direct materials cost. Okay, direct materials cost. These are the materials that you actually used in the actual production of the good, whatever is it that you're manufacturing. So, they give you a lot of information. We're going to focus on anything that has to do with materials. Okay, so the first thing that we have here is materials purchased. Okay, you purchased $4,125,000 of materials. So I'm going to have here direct materials cost. Okay, so the first thing we have is materials purchased. And we purchased $4,125,000 of materials. Okay. Excuse me. Now, we need to look at what else has materials. So that doesn't. Now, I've already used these, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark them off. That way I don't get confused. So I already used my sales. I've already used my gross profit here. Okay. Now, I've already used my materials purchased right here. Okay, so let's go back and let's look at the things that we haven't used that deal with materials. Here we have indirect materials, $180,000. These are materials that are needed, but they're indirect. They're not directly associated with the product. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to deduct those indirect materials. We don't want to include them. So let's indirect materials. and we have indirect materials of 180. Okay. 180. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay. So I've already used that. So let's use indirect materials right there. Okay. What else do we have? Okay. Materials inventory, end of period. So what this means is, yes, you did purchase $4.125 million in materials, but at the end of the period, you still had $290,000 remaining, which means you didn't use that. So because you haven't used it, you can't put it in your calculation. You need to exclude it because it has not been used. So I'm going to deduct it. I'm going to deduct my materials inventory, end of period. Okay. And we had $290,000. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark that off. That way I know I've used it. Okay. So I'm going to add these two together. And I'm going to go ahead and I am going to put the number right here. It's going to be equals the sum of these two. Okay. So that gives me $470,000. Now it needs to be deducted. It's less. So because it needs to be deducted, I need to put it in parentheses. So I'm going to add a minus sign. Okay. That needs to be deducted. Okay. I'm going to deduct it. Why? Because indirect materials don't apply. We're wanting to figure out direct materials cost, only direct material cost. So I'm going to deduct my indirect materials, and I'm also going to deduct my ending inventory because that is inventory that I have not used. So it's not material cost that I incurred this period. Okay. So now I can calculate my direct materials cost, and that is going to be, you're going to get the sum of your $4,125,000 minus your $470,000, and that will give you $3,655,000. That is your direct material cost right there. Okay. The third thing that we need to calculate is direct labor costs. These are the people that are actually putting together the product. Okay. This is not the maintenance person that's cleaning the factory. He's not actually building anything. He's just maintaining it, cleaning it, okay? So we are trying to figure out direct labor cost now, okay? So let's put the heading over here, direct labor cost, okay? And my direct labor cost, okay, how are we going to figure that out? Now this one's a little bit more tricky, okay? So what do we know about labor? We know that we have indirect labor of $410,000. We have other factory overhead of $810,000. And we have total manufacturing costs for the period of $7,880,000. Okay? So we've already figured out my cost of goods sold. We've already figured out my direct material cost. So I know how much I spend in material. I know what I spend in total. Now we need to figure out, how much did you spend on direct labor? Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off with our total manufacturing cost for the period. Okay. And my total manufacturing cost for the period was $7,880,000. Okay. $7,880,000. Okay. Insert shapes. I've already used that one, so I'm going to mark that off. Okay. Now, what does this total manufacturing cost for the period represent? That includes all of your costs, your materials, your labor, and your overhead. That is how much you spend during the period for manufacturing. $7,880,000. Okay. Now we're going to deduct the information we already have. So I'm going to deduct less direct material cost because we already figured out how much we spend in materials. So I need to deduct that for my calculation. So I know that I spend $3,655,000 right here on materials. So that number is going to go over here, okay? Okay. So my direct material cost is $3,655,000. Okay. Now, there's three components in our manufacturing cost: materials, labor, and overhead. I've already deducted material cost, which we had calculated. Now I need to deduct my direct or my factory overhead. Factory overhead. Okay. Okay, so they give you here other factory overhead of $810,000. Okay. So that is part of your calculation. Now I'm going to put a little asterisk here so I can know how I calculated this figure down here. Okay. So my factory overhead is my other factory overhead. FOH is factory overhead of $810,000 plus, okay, what else did we have? Well, we had other factory overhead of $810,000. Okay. Okay, so here we have to get the 810,000, which we did, of other factory overhead. Okay, and then we have indirect labor. Now this is the people, like I said, the people that are working in the factory, but they're not actually making the product. They could be the supervisors, they could be the cleaning crew, whatever. Indirect labor. So anything that's indirectly associated with it goes under factory overhead. So now I have indirect labor of 410,000. Okay, and there's one other thing that we have that goes under overhead. Insert. Where is it? Okay, here we go. So I've already used other factory overhead. Okay, and I've used indirect labor. Insert shapes so I can scratch that off. Now, there's another thing that I need to deduct, okay? That should be included in my indirect, or in my factory overhead, I'm sorry. So there's three things that need to be going over your factory overhead in this case. We have our other factory overhead costs, which they've highlighted for you of 810,000. You've got indirect labor of 410,000. And then we have indirect materials. Those indirect materials, we deducted them over here. Well, we need to add them into our overhead cost. So I'm going to add my 180,000 of indirect materials. Okay. Materials. And my indirect materials were $180,000. So that is going to give me, let me get my calculator because I'm not very good with doing math on my head. So I've got 810,000 for my other factory overhead plus 410,000 for my indirect labor and 180,000 for my indirect materials. That gives me $1,400,000. Okay. So, to calculate your factory overhead, basically under factory overhead, anything else that is not direct materials or direct labor, that is a cost associated with the factory, goes under factory overhead. So for factory overhead, we had the other factory overhead they gave you of 810,000. Then we have to put in our indirect labor and our indirect materials. So that gives us $1,400,000. Okay. Now we add those two together, and we're gonna get a total. Okay, we get $5,055,000. Now we are deducting; it's less. So because it's less, I'm gonna get that number and I'm gonna put it in parentheses because I need to subtract it. Okay, so there we go, $5,055,000. So now I know that I spent in total $7,880,000 for my materials, labor, and overhead. I deducted my material cost of $3,655,000. I deducted my factory overhead of $1.4 million. Now I can calculate my missing component, which is my direct labor cost. So my direct labor cost is going to be the sum of your 7,880,000 plus your 5,055,000. Okay, so that will be 2,825,000. That is the amount that you spend on direct labor costs. Okay, so using the information that they provided with you in the problem, you were able to work backwards, and from your total manufacturing cost, exclude the materials and deduct the factory overhead to be able to calculate your direct labor cost. So these are the three components that needed to be calculated: cost of goods sold, direct material cost, and direct labor cost. Okay, so that is the first exercise. Okay, so this is kind of like a warm-up so we can get started. Okay, now the next problem that we're going to be dealing with is exercise 1610. Okay, here we're going to be calculating, in this chapter they show us how to calculate our predetermined factory overhead rate. So it says, Exotic Engine Shop uses a job order cost system to determine the cost of performing engine repair works. Estimated costs and expenses for the coming period are as follows. So according to their estimates here, we're going to be spending $380,000 in engine parts, $1,872,000 in shop direct labor, $62,500 in shop and repair equipment depreciation, $240,000 in shop supervisor salaries, $36,940 in shop property taxes, $10,000 in shop supplies, $28,000 in advertising expense, $150,000 in administrative office salaries, and $8,000 in administrative office depreciation expense. So our total cost for the shop is going to be $2,787,440. So they're also giving you the average shop direct labor rate of $37.50 per hour. Okay, so that is how much they pay, or that's how much the labor rate is per shop direct labor, $37.50. Now, they're asking you to determine the predetermined shop overhead rate per direct labor hour. So we have to determine the predetermined shop overhead rate per direct labor hour. Okay. So the first thing that we need to figure out is, what is our overhead? Okay. What is my shop's overhead? How much am I spending in overhead? Remember the three components: materials, labor, and overhead. Here we're more interested in calculating the overhead rate. So in order to be able to calculate the overhead rate, first we need to figure out what's my shop overhead. Well, we're going to start off by calculating the estimated shop overhead using the following. Okay, so the first thing we have is we have to identify which of these components belong to overhead. Engine parts, those are direct materials. Shop direct labor, that's your labor right there, your direct labor. Okay, now look at the third item: shop and repair equipment depreciation. Does that fall under materials or labor? No, that falls under overhead. So that's the first item that I'm going to include. Okay, shop and repair equipment depreciation. Okay, and the amount is $62,500. Okay. Okay. Now we have shop supervisor salaries. Okay. Now, the supervisor is looking over the production. He's not actually manufacturing the product. Okay. So, here we have the direct labor. These are the people that are actually putting together the product. Your supervisor is just overseeing. So this is an indirect labor, and indirect labor goes under overhead. So we're going to have the shop supervisor salaries of $240,000. Okay. Shop property taxes. Okay. These taxes are not materials. These taxes are not labor. So if they don't fall into those two categories, then they fall into the other bucket, which is your overhead. So here we're going to have our shop property taxes. And we have property taxes of $36,940. Remember, we have three buckets: materials, direct labor, And whatever doesn't fall into those two buckets, then it goes into the third bucket, which is your overhead. Okay, 36,940. Excuse me. Okay. Then we have shop supplies. These are supplies that are needed, but they're not really associated or tied to the actual process that we're doing for our customers. Okay, so it's just general supplies. So general supplies go under overhead. So we have shop supplies of $10,000. Okay, so then we have advertising expense. That is not part of the component of materials, labor, or overhead. And then these two are admin expenses. So these are not accounted for here. We only account for three things: direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. So now we are ready to calculate my total shop overhead. So I'm going to add those together. So this is your total overhead cost right here, $349,440. Okay. Now here I'm going to explain. Okay. So we know that the engine parts and shop labor are direct to the jobs. And these costs are not included in the shop overhead rate. Okay, so we have three components: materials, labor, and overhead. Materials and labor are separate. Everything else that is associated with the shop goes into overhead. Okay, now the advertising expense. Okay, they have an advertising expense and administrative expenses. They have two administrative expenses. Okay, are selling and admin expenses. Okay. And these costs are not included in the shop overhead rate, but instead are treated as period expenses. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify. Advertising expense, admin expenses, they're not part of materials, labor, or overhead. These are selling and admin expenses, and these are treated as period costs. These are the costs for the people in the office that are doing payroll, that are making the sales, that are putting together the TV commercials so they can advertise. That's what they're working on. Okay, so these costs are not associated directly with manufacturing the product. Okay, when we manufacture the product, we only have three categories: direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. Okay, so now that we know that my shop overhead is $349,440, okay, we can calculate the estimated activity base is determined by dividing the shop direct labor cost by the direct labor rate. Okay. So the estimated activity base is determined by dividing the shop direct labor cost by the direct labor rate. Okay. Determine the predetermined shop overhead rate per direct labor hour. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get the direct labor cost. My direct labor cost is $1,872,000 right here. 1,872,000. Okay, 1,872,000, 1, 2, 3, and I'm gonna divide that by my direct labor rate of 37.50. Oh, sorry. Okay. So we're going to divide the 1,872,000, which is your direct labor cost, by the rate of 37.50 per hour. So how many hours did the employees work for you to have spent 1,872,000 if you're paying them $37.50 an hour? Well, we need to get a calculator, because I don't know how to do this in my head. So it'll be 1,872,000, 1, 2, 3, divided by 37.50. So you would have had to, or they would have had to work 49,920 hours. 49,920 hours. So the estimated activity base is our number of hours, which we calculated. We spent 49,920 hours. Okay. Now we can figure out the predetermined shop overhead rate. Okay. So to get our predetermined factory overhead rate, we're going to obtain how much was my overhead. Well, my overhead is 349,440. Okay. And I'm going to divide, this is my overhead cost, by how many hours did we invest in during the shop. Well, we put in 49,920 hours. Okay. So we have 349,440. That is my overhead cost for the period. I'm going to divide it by my driver, which is my activity base of 49,920. So that's going to give me $7 an hour. Okay. Okay, so the predetermined shop overhead rate is going to be $7 per direct labor hour. So what does this mean? This means that for every hour that I spent, I'm going to charge that customer $7, or that's how much I'm spending, $7 of overhead. Okay, so the direct labor rate is $37.50. And the predetermined shop overhead rate is $7. Okay, so if it takes me 1 hour to complete my job, I'm going to charge $7 of overhead. If it takes me 2 hours to complete the job, then I'm going to charge $14 of overhead, so on and so forth. Okay, so we were trying to figure out the predetermined shop overhead rate per direct labor hour. We knew we had spent $349,440 of overhead. But how are we going to apply that to the job? Well, we're going to apply it based on labor, number of hours. Okay, so we calculated all of that information so we could be able to come up with, you know what, for every hour that you spend, whatever is it that they're doing, they're repairing these engines. Okay, so if you spend 1 hour, then I'm going to charge you $7 of overhead for that hour. Okay, if you take half an hour, then I'm going to charge you $3.50, half an hour for that. So that is how we calculate it. We calculate this by getting your total overhead cost of $349,440 by the number of hours worked. That was 49,920, and that gave you a overhead rate of $7 per hour. And remember, these three items are period expenses. They do not fall under direct materials, direct labor, or overhead. Okay. Now the next problem, 16.2, is kind of long, but it's very important important because you're going to probably see something like this on your test. So pay very close attention because you're going to have something similar to this on your upcoming exam, okay? So, problem 16-2A says entries and schedules for unfinished jobs and completed jobs. It says Kurtz Fencing Incorporated uses a job order cost system, which is what Chapter 16 is about. The following data summarize the operations related to the production for March, the first month of operations. Then they give you transactions A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Okay? Instructions. The first thing that we have to do is we have to journalize the entries to record the summarized operations. So we're going to take it a step at a time. So they're asking us to journalize transactions A through G. And we've got our journal here. Okay? So this is requirement 1. Okay. So the first thing that we have is for letter A. Okay? Letter A says, materials purchased on account, $45,000. Well, what did you buy? Well, I purchased materials, okay? Oh, I'm going to have issues again with this. Let me see if I can copy and paste. Control copy, control paste special values. Let me see. Let me see if it allows me to save it. What was it? Materials, right? Materials. Oh my lord, it's happening again. Just give me a second here so I can figure it out. The value you entered is not valid. Okay, cancel. Let me see. Cut. Paste special. Paste. Let me see. Oh, it's still giving it to me. What can I do? Just give me a second. Technology. Cut. Paste. Okay, what if I do just the middle? This is where I'm having issues with. Cut. Paste. Nope. Okay, so it's not letting me. So let me see if I can just insert some new cells here. Okay, I'll just do as I go. So I'm not gonna start the presentation all over again. Okay. So I'm gonna have to insert some cells here. Just give me a second, and then I'm gonna merge them. Okay, merge cells. Okay, cut, and I'm gonna paste it over here. Okay, and then I'm gonna cut and paste over here, and I don't think that should give me an issue. Okay, let me see. Let me see if it will let me type. Yes. Okay, perfect. So I'll just do that for everyone. I'll just reinsert. Okay, so letter A. Okay. Let me just make them. Here we go. Okay, so materials purchased on account. What are we buying? Well, we're buying materials. Okay. But before I do that, give me a minute. I just want to copy a couple of these down. That way I'm going to be reusing them. There we go. And I can just recopy and paste. Okay. So, the first thing we have here is materials purchased on account, $45,000. So what did we buy? Well, we bought materials. Okay. So let me format this on the side. And I'm going to do Arial 18. Okay. So, we purchased materials. How much did we buy in materials? We bought $45,000 worth of material. Okay? Extra 0, 45, 1, 2, 3. Okay? How did you pay for these materials? It says here that you purchased them on account. So, because you purchased them on account, that means that you're going to be using the accounts payable. You owe this money. Okay? You bought them on account, you have to pay for that at a future point in time. Okay, so you're gonna have to credit your accounts payable. Okay, so the entry for letter A is materials purchased on account, 45,000. Materials gets debited for the 45,000. How did you pay for them? On account. So we're gonna set up an accounts payable for 45,000. Okay, now for letter B. Okay, let me just insert a couple of cells here. Okay. For letter B, I'm going to cut it and I'm going to paste it over here. Okay. Okay. So for letter B, let me delete this one. Okay. So for letter B, it says materials requisitioned and factory labor used. Okay. So whenever it means materials requisition, it means that you had materials in your warehouse, and when you requisition them, is that you request for them to be moved from your warehouse to actual production, because we're going to start working in manufacturing specific products for specific jobs in this case. Okay. So here they're telling you that you had jobs 301, 302, 303, 304, 305, and 306. These are the materials that you requisitioned and the labor that was put into the specific jobs. Okay. Now we have a last category here, which is for general factory use. So this is basically your indirect materials and your indirect labor. Okay. So we have to enter that transaction. Now, I'm going to start off with the information that I know. Okay. So let's look at materials. Okay. So what happens? When you buy materials, you debit the account. Okay. As you use materials, as you get the materials out of the warehouse and into production, your materials are going to decrease. So when you decrease materials, you are going to have to credit your account. So I'm going to have to credit materials for the materials that were actually put into production. Okay? So because we requisitioned them. Well, how much materials did we put into production? Well, they give you the amounts here. So let's get our calculator. 1850 plus 3150 plus 2200 plus 1800 plus 4230 plus 1770 plus 1200. So we pulled out from the warehouse $16,200 worth of materials. So I'm going to deduct those materials from what I have in my warehouse, so that way I can know exactly what I have on my warehouse available. So I'm going to deduct $16,200 for my materials that I requisition. Okay. Now, I know that I use this labor. Okay. I haven't paid my employees yet. I owe my employees money, okay, for what they've worked in these specific jobs. So when I owe my employees, I'm going to have wages payable. And it's under a payable because I have not paid my employees yet. I owe them money, okay? So how much money do I owe them for their wages on these jobs? Well, we're going to add it together, and we're looking at factory labor, okay? 2,500 plus 7,220 plus 5,350 plus 2,400, 6,225, 2,900, and 5,000. So we have 31,595 in labor. Okay. Okay. Now, I need to figure out how much am I going to put into my overhead. Okay. I need to start accumulating my factory overhead, and we accumulate factory overhead, and at the end of the period we allocate the overhead to the different jobs based on the predetermined overhead. So, factory overhead. This is your indirect labor, indirect materials, and anything else that, any other thing that does not fall into those categories. So, I have two things here that I know fall under overhead. And that is let me put this here. That is your general factory use. That falls under overhead, okay? That falls under overhead. So how much did we spend on indirect materials and indirect labor? Well, I spent $5,000 plus $1,200. That's $6,200. That needs to go into my factory overhead bucket. Okay, $6,200. Okay. Now I can figure out how much do I have in work in process. Okay. So work in process is basically everything that's directly associated with manufacturing the product. Okay. So let's get our calculator out. And we know that we've put into production, into work in process, these amounts of direct materials. So I'm going to get my 1850, 3150, 2200, 1800, 4230, 1770. I'm going to exclude that 1200. That's not going to be included. That goes into overhead. And then I know that I've also spent this much in labor. So I'm going to add the 2500 of labor, 7220, 5350, 2400, 6225, and 2900. So I know that in materials and labor, I've put into these jobs 41,595. Okay, so the work in process represents the materials and labor that you've put into it, excluding indirect labor and materials. Okay, so this is how much you spend in direct labors and materials. The $6,200 represents your indirect labor and materials. And then here is your total materials and your total wages. Okay, let's do letter C. Let me just move it up. That's letter D. That way we have everything formatted. And then letter E, we need another one, two of these. Okay, so that'd be E. Let me delete these. And remember, the reason I'm doing this is because the system won't allow me to insert information. I copied them from an Excel spreadsheet that I had, and I guess the copy was, the file was copyrighted, and it won't let me do anything. But I'll just quickly format it here, and we will be able to move on. Okay. Okay, so that was letter B. Letter C, factory overhead cost incurred on account, $1,800. So you incurred $1,800 of some kind of factory overhead cost. Okay, but you paid for these on account. Okay, so what did you spend this on? On factory overhead. Okay, how did you pay for this factory overhead? It says on account. Every time it's on account, we use accounts payable. We owe this money. Okay, and the amount for letter C is $1,800. So factory overhead gets added, those $1,800 of overhead cost, and my accounts payable increases by $1,800. Okay, letter D, depreciation of machinery and equipment, $2,500. So depreciation of machinery is tied to the production of the good or service. Okay, you need the machine to be able to produce. Okay, but is the depreciation, does it fall under direct materials? No. Does it fall under direct labor? No. Depreciation falls under factory overhead. Okay, so we need to put that into my factory overhead. So we have factory overhead. And my factory overhead is $2,500. Okay, and I am going to go ahead and I'm going to credit, and this is depreciation of machinery. So I'm going to credit my accumulated depreciation for the machinery and equipment. Okay, okay, there we go. So we have accumulated depreciation for the, oh, sorry about that. Accumulated depreciation for the machinery and equipment is $2,500. Let me see if I can just make this a little bit bigger. There we go. $2,500. Okay. Remember, when you're doing your entries, debits must always equal credits. So like here where you have multiple transactions, always make sure that your debits, which is $41,595 plus $6,200, that's $47,795, equals your credits, which it does. Okay. Always make sure debits must always equal credits. Okay. Letter E. Okay. It says the factory overhead rate is $30 per machine hour. Machine hours used are as follows. So this is how much you use the machines for each job. Okay. And they give you the job numbers, the number of machine hours, and the total. So for letter E, okay, we need to put these, letter E, machine hours. Okay, we need to put this into our overhead. How much did we spend on machine hours? Well, we spent 300 hours at $30 per machine hour. So we're going to put this into our work in process. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to credit our factory overhead. Now, for the factory overhead, right below here, let me put a calculation. Okay. How do we get that? Okay. Okay. Well, it says here that we have 300 machine hours times $30 per machine hour. Okay. Okay. So, let's get our calculator. We're going to have 300 machine hours times $30 a machine hour. That's, 300 times 30. That gives me $9,000. Okay, so $9,000 of work in process, $9,000 of factory overhead. So the factory overhead rate is $30 per machine hour, and we have 300 machine hours. So we are allocating the factory overhead rate based on machine hours, and that came up to $9,000. So what we did here is we added our overhead into our work in process. So in work in process right here, I have my materials, my labor, and now I have my overhead down here. Okay. Letter F. I think I need to insert cells, control copy, control paste. Okay. Okay. So, letter F. Jobs completed. 301, 302, 303, and 305. Okay, so we have several jobs that we started. We were able to complete 301, 302, 303, and 305. So we are missing to complete 304 and 306. Okay, but these 4 jobs were completed from beginning to end. Okay, so we need to figure out my cost for materials, my cost for labor, and my cost for overhead for these jobs that were completed. Okay, so direct materials. Okay, we're going to have to go back over here, materials, and we're going to pick up these numbers. For 301, it's $18.50. Okay. For 302, it's $31.50. For 303, it's $2,200. And then for 305, it's $42.30. Okay. So we're getting the totals from the information provided. Okay. And then we're going to get the labor for those jobs. Okay. So for 301, it's $2,500. For 302, it's $72.20. For 303, it's $53.50. And for 305, it's $62.25. Now, factory overhead. Here, we're going to get the information from here. For job 301, okay, here you're going to have to do some calculations. 301 is 30 hours times $30 an hour per machine hour. That's $900. Okay, so it'll be $900 here. Then the next one is 60 hours times $30. That's going to be $1,800 right here. For job 303, it's 41 hours times $30. The rate is right here, $30 rate. That'll be $1,230. Okay, and then 305, it'll be 70 hours times 30. That'll be $2,100. Okay. Once you have that, you get the total for each. Okay. And then you get your subtotal, your grand total of how much you spent on those jobs that you completed. So we spent $38,755 in direct materials, labor, and overhead for jobs 301, 302, 303, and 305. Okay? So it says jobs were completed. Okay? So if we notice here, we had costs for these items under work in process. Why? Because we're manufacturing the product. Now these products have been finished. They're ready to be sold. So it says here you've completed these jobs. So you're going to have to move them from work in process to finished goods. Okay? So how much am I moving out from work in process to finished goods? Well, we're moving out $38,755, what we calculated. So now I'm going to debit my finished goods. So this represents the goods that are in your warehouse ready to be sold. How much do we have? We have $38,755. And that number is coming from over here. Okay? And what are we doing? Well, we're reducing our working process. So we already finished with them, so we're going to credit working process. So we can deduct those from the actual work that we have in process right now. So we're transferring them from work in process out of work in process and into finished goods. Okay? Letter G. I need to copy a couple of more. Okay. Control copy. Control paste. Control paste. Okay. Cut. And paste. Okay. So I can delete this. There we go. Okay, so now the next component is letter G. Now, here they're telling you jobs were shipped and customers were billed as follows. So you got your jobs, you shipped them out, and you billed your customers. Your customers haven't paid you yet, but you've already billed them and you've already shipped them the goods. Okay, so the jobs were finished and shipped to your customers, and you billed for job 301, $8,500, for 302, $16,150, and for job 303, $13,400. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to record our sale. Okay. We have sold these goods. Okay. So what did we do? We made a sale. Okay. The normal balance of a sale or revenue account is a credit. Okay. So how much do we have in sales? Okay. Let's get a calculator. That'll be $8,500 plus $16,150 plus $13,400. That'll be $38,050. I added those three jobs. Okay, so my sales are $38,050. Now, have these customers paid you? No, you have not received cash. So what are you going to set up in your books? If a customer owes you money, then you set up an accounts receivable. Okay? And don't get confused with receivable and payable. Accounts receivable is money that you are going to receive from a customer that owes you money. Accounts payable is when we owe someone else money. Okay? So payable, we need to pay. Receivable, we are going to receive the money. So I'm setting up a receivable for $38,050. $38,850. Okay, so here I've recorded my sell in my books. I've sold $38,050 of these jobs. Okay, now I also need to update my finished goods. Okay, so I had a whole bunch of finished jobs in my warehouse. I've already shipped them out, so because they're gone, I need to reduce my finished goods balance and update my cost of goods sold. So I need to figure out the jobs that were shipped or the jobs that were actually sold. Okay, so it says here, okay, we need to figure out how much money did we spend on jobs 301, 302, and 303. These numbers represent the sales price. That is how much we sold them for. We need to figure out how much we paid to manufacture or make these three different jobs. Okay, so job 301. Okay, we're gonna get the information from down up here. Okay, so job 301, we had spent $1,850 in materials, $2,500 in labor, and $900 in overhead. So we spent $5,250. Okay. Job 302, we spent $12,170. Sorry, I mistyped. Okay, so these numbers will flow down here. This is how much you spend per job. Okay, job number 303, we spent $87.80. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're gonna add those together, and we get $26,200. So that is how much we spend on those three jobs. So we spent $26,200 to make the product, and we sold it for $38,050. Okay, so we need to record that we've sold those goods for those jobs. They're no longer in our warehouse, so we need to record our cost of goods sold because these products have been sold. Cost of goods sold for $26,200. And what's going to happen to my finished goods? It's going to decrease because I no longer have these goods in my warehouse. They're gone. I've already shipped them. Okay. So this represents the cost for us to manufacture the product. The $38,050, which is the amount here, that is how much you sold it for. You sold it for $38.50. Okay. So how much did we make? So we sold them for $38.50. It cost us $26,200 to make. So we made $11,850. It's pretty good. Okay. So that is requirement 1. Journalize the entries to record the summarized operations. Now, journal entry 2, it's telling you to post the appropriate entries to the T accounts for work in process and finished goods using identifying letters as transaction codes. Okay, insert memo account balances as of end of month. So now they're asking us to calculate the ending balance for work in process and finished goods. Only for those two accounts. Okay, work in process and finished goods. Okay, so I'm going to go up to my journal entry and I'm going to find anything that deals with work in process. Okay, work in process, and I'm going to highlight them a different color. That way it stands out to me. Okay, work in process. Okay, work in process right here. Okay. And I believe that is it. We have 3 transactions that deal with work in process. So now we have to bring those and we're going to have to copy them over in our T accounts. So the first one we have is letter B, $41,595 debit. So it's letter B. And for $41,595. Okay. The next one we have is letter E, and we have a debit of $9,000. Okay. So it's letter E, and we have a debit of $9,000. Okay. And then we have letter F. We have a credit of $38,755. Okay, so letter F right here. And we have $38,755. So by now you should know how to calculate or foot your T accounts. That was covered in Accounting 2401, Introduction to Accounting. So that should be very easy. So what we do is we get our calculator, we add our debits, 41,595 plus 9,000. That gives me 50,595. And then I subtract my credits of 38,755. So my balance is 11,840 debit. Why debit? Because the debit balance is greater than the credit balance. Okay. So my work in process balance is 11,840. Now we have our finished goods. We're going to look for anything that has finished goods on it. Right here. Finished goods. And we have another one over here, finished goods. Okay. So we have two entries to finished goods. The first entry is letter F. And we have a debit of 38,755. Okay, and then we have letter G. And letter G is 26,200 right here, 26,200. So we're going to get our ending balance. So my higher amount is the debit, so my balance should be on the debit side. Now this is a balance sheet account. The normal balance is the debit. These are your inventory accounts. We have work in process, we have finished goods, and we have raw materials, okay? So we've got 38,755. Oh, sorry about that. 38,755, and I'm going to subtract 26,200. That's going to give me a debit balance of 12,555. 12,555. Okay. So what does this tell you? This tells me that I still have in work in process. These are the jobs that I have not finished. I have 11,840. Okay. Now I have $12,555 left in finished goods sitting in my warehouse that are available to be sold or shipped out. Okay. So that is what this tells you. Okay. That is requirement 2. Post the entries to the T accounts for your work in process and finished goods using the identifying letters. Okay. And then post insert memo account balances as of the end of the month. Okay. So those are our number 2. Number 3, prepare a schedule of unfinished jobs to support the balance in the work in process account. Okay. I forgot to add number 4, but I'll do that right now. So requirement 3, prepare a schedule of unfinished jobs. These are the jobs that you did not finish. Okay. Okay. So let's go back and let's look at which jobs did we finish. Well, we finished jobs 301, 302, 303, and 305. So which jobs did we not finish? We did not finish 304 or 306. 304 or 306. Okay. So for 304, we need to go back and we need to figure out how much did we spend in 304? Well, we spent $1,800 in materials, $2,400 in labor. Okay, so let's put that in there. Okay, so we spent $1,800 in materials, and in labor we spent $2,400. Okay. In factory overhead for 304, we had 63 hours. Right here, 63 times 30 an hour. That's $1,890. Okay. That is $1,890. So your total, you just add those 3. You add material, labor, and overhead. That gives you $1,690. Okay. Now the other job that we didn't finish was 306. Okay. So we spent $1,770 in materials and $2,900 in labor. Okay, so let's put that over here. $1,770 in materials, $2,900 in labor. How much did we spend on overhead? We're looking at job 306. So 306 had 36 hours. Okay. At $30 a piece, that's $1,080. Okay. So it'll be $1,080. We're going to add those together. Okay. So that gives me $5,750. So the total of my 2 jobs that have not been completed is the sum of those 2. That's 11,840. Now, if you notice, you had work in process of 11,840. Well, what makes up those 11,840s? This schedule tells you what makes up those 11,840. So that number on your T account needs to match that number on your schedule right there. Okay? So, okay, we have work in process. These are the jobs that have not been completed of 11,840. The schedule supplements that information and tells you exactly which job and how much you've spent on materials, labor, and overhead. Okay? Now, the fourth requirement, let me see if I have my ebook open. It kicked me out. Let me see if I can log back in. Oh, it locked me out of everything. It's been a long while. Let me see. Let me load. The fourth requirement is asking us for a schedule of completed jobs. So let me just make sure that I have that information correct from the ebook. Okay, so this is managerial accounting. And these problems are coming from the end of your chapter, and then you'll have something similar to this on your homework. Okay, same concept, just different dollar amounts. Okay, so let me go to the ebook. And then we are looking at problem 16-2A. So I'm going to go to chapter 16. And then, yes, I'm missing requirement 4. So I'm going to copy that requirement over here. Okay, so I do insert, screenshot, screen clipping, and I'm going to do requirement 4. There we go. That way we have everything there. Okay, so requirement 4 says prepare a schedule of completed jobs on hand to support the balance in the finished goods account. So if we look over here on my T account for finished goods, I have $12,555 worth of jobs that have been completed and they're just sitting on my warehouse. They're done, ready to be shipped. So what makes up those $12,555? Okay, so if we look here, we look closely, it says the jobs completed were 301, 302, 303, and 305. Okay, and this is where we have to use our critical thinking and go back and see, okay, analyze the information. It says here that you shipped out 301, 302, and 303. So which one are you pending to ship out? Well, that means that we're pending to ship out 305. That has not been shipped out and it's still sitting in my warehouse. Okay, so my cost for 305 had already been calculated up here. Okay, when we calculated our cost of jobs finished. Okay, so all we have to do is basically just copy that information over to our schedule. Okay, we already identified that that's the one that we have not completed. And it didn't allow us to. Okay, well, we'll just copy it. So we have materials of 4230, and we're just getting this the same thing. Job 305, you can get it from up here. 4230, 6225. And remember the factory overhead, you have to get right here. 70 hours. 70 times 30, that gives you 2100. Sorry, here we go. 2100. And then we add them together. You add your materials, your labor, and your overhead. Okay? You add those three together, and that gives you 12,555. So now your finished goods right here, so your T account, that shows you a balance of 12,555. Okay? So now, when they ask you, well, what makes up 12,555? Well, what makes up the 12,555 is job number 305. Okay, that has been completed. It's sitting in my warehouse. I still need to ship it out. It's done, complete. This is what I spend on it, and that's what made that 12,555 that $12,555 represents the completed job 305 that's sitting on my finished goods inventory account. Okay, so if you notice, the balance on your finished goods account needs to tie to the balance on your schedule for completed jobs. The balance on your work in process T account needs to balance to the balance on your schedule of unfinished jobs. Okay, so this is kind of like a very long problem, but it's very nice because it allows you to prepare transactions, do different calculations, identify the direct materials, direct labor, calculate your overhead, move transactions, balances from your work in process to your finished goods, sell the record the sale of the jobs, and then figure out how much do you have in your work in process, how much do you have sitting in your finished goods, and create the schedules for each. So it's a very comprehensive problem. You are going to have something similar to this on your test. So please make sure that when you are working on your homework that you practice. If you don't get a 70% or better on your homework assignments, I highly encourage that you utilize the second attempt provided. 2 attempts are provided for both your homework and your quizzes, and I always keep the highest grade. And the homework serves as practice. Okay, so if you didn't get it very well the first time, then try again the second time. If you score higher, I'll keep the highest score, and you were able to practice a little bit more of the actual problem solving. Okay, so those are the 3 problems that I'm going to go over for this chapter 16 lecture. Please, like I said before, when you're working your assignments, you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me a Blackboard message. Ask me when you're needing help, or if you need to speak with me outside of my office hours, you can do that as well. I'm here to provide as much assistance as I can. This is an online class, but I don't want you to feel that you're alone or that I'm just giving you assignments and you're left with you working them out on your own. Okay? Reading needs to happen before you do anything. So make sure that you've read. If I speak with you on the phone and I start asking questions, I can tell if a student has read or has not read the content. Okay? It's very important that you read, you review the PowerPoints, you go over the lecture, and then you start working on your problems. Okay? So that's it for chapter 6. Until next time, be careful, stay safe, and you'll hear from me when we cover the next chapter. Have a good day.